Your toddler is currently failing at something they were never supposed to succeed at. The hitting, the screaming, the no that comes before you've even finished your sentence, the meltdown in the grocery store aisle over the wrong color cup. You've been told to correct it, redirect it, discipline it away. You've read the books, watched the reels, maybe even cried in the car wondering what you're doing wrong. But here's what nobody told you. Every single one of those behaviors, the ones making you question yourself at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, they are not signs of failure, not yours, not theirs. They are, according to decades of developmental neuroscience, signs of a brain doing exactly what it was built to do. Stay with me, because what you're about to understand will change how you see your child. And honestly, it might change how you see yourself too. For most of the 20th century, the gold standard for a well-behaved child was simple: compliance. A good child sat still. A good child shared without protest. A good child said yes when adults said yes and went quiet when adults went quiet. The entire architecture of early childhood, schools, parenting manuals, pediatric advice, was built on the idea that children were unfinished adults, and the job of parents was to sand down the rough edges as fast as possible. The problem is that developmental science has spent the last 50 years dismantling that idea entirely. What researchers studying child development now understand, through behavioral observation, neuroimaging, and longitudinal studies tracking children across years, is that the behaviors we labeled defiant or difficult are not bugs in the developmental system. They are features. They are the visible surface of invisible, essential work happening inside a growing brain. The toddler years, roughly ages 1 through 3, represent the single most explosive period of neural development in a human life. More than 1 million new neural connections form every single second during early childhood. The behaviors that emerge during this window are not random. They are the behavioral expression of specific developmental tasks the brain is working through. When your 2-year-old refuses to share, something real is happening neurologically. When they hit, something real is happening. When they fall apart over a broken cracker, something very real and very important is happening. This video is not going to tell you those behaviors don't matter, or that you should just let your toddler run wild. It's going to show you what those behaviors actually mean, so you can respond to what's really happening instead of fighting a battle that was never yours to win. Let's start with the one that probably gets the most correction in homes around the world. No. It comes out of nowhere. You ask your toddler if they want their coat on. No. You offer the snack they begged for 10 minutes ago. No. You say it's time for bath, the bath they love, and they look you dead in the eye and say no with the energy of someone who has never been more certain of anything in their entire life. And your instinct is to override it, to explain, to redirect, to insist, because you're the parent and you know what needs to happen. But here's what that no actually is. Developmental psychologists refer to this stage as the emergence of autonomous selfhood. Around 18 months to 2 years, a toddler's brain begins to consolidate a revolutionary understanding. I am a separate person from my caregiver. I have preferences. I have a will. And I can express that will through language. No is not defiance. No is the first complete sentence a toddler uses to declare their own existence. The child development pioneer Jean Piaget observed that this period, what he called the pre-operational stage, is when children first begin to understand themselves as agents in the world. They are not just responding to stimuli. They are initiating. They are choosing. That capacity for autonomous choice is the exact same capacity that will, 15 years from now, allow your teenager to say no to peer pressure, no to a dangerous situation, no to someone who doesn't deserve their yes. You are not watching defiance. You are watching the birth of a self. Now, does that mean you let them skip the coat in January? Of course not. But there's a profound difference between responding to no as a behavioral problem to eliminate and responding to it as a developmental signal to acknowledge. I hear you don't want to. We still need to put the coat on because it's cold. You can carry it to the car yourself if you want. That response honors the emerging self while still holding the boundary. The no doesn't win every time, but it gets heard. And being heard is what teaches a child that their voice matters. Be honest with yourself right now. How often do you override the no without acknowledging it at all? Drop a 1 in the comments if you've caught yourself doing this. I think the number might surprise you. This one is harder to reframe because hitting hurts. And when your toddler hits you or hits another child, every instinct you have says, stop this now. You should stop it. But the way you stop it matters enormously, and it depends entirely on understanding what's actually driving the behavior. Here is the neuroscience. The toddler brain has a fully operational amygdala, the brain's threat detection and emotional response center, but an almost entirely undeveloped prefrontal cortex, which is the region responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and the ability to pause before acting. That prefrontal cortex won't be fully developed until around age 25. What this means practically is that when a toddler feels overwhelmed, frustrated, overstimulated, scared, or unable to communicate what they need, the emotional signal fires, and there is no adequate braking system to stop the physical response. The hit is not a moral failing. It is the behavioral output of a brain that doesn't yet have the wiring to do anything else. Experienced child development specialists will tell you that toddlers who hit frequently are almost always toddlers who are either language delayed relative to their emotional experience or who are in environments with high sensory or emotional load. The hands speak when the words aren't there yet. That doesn't mean hitting is acceptable behavior. It isn't, and saying so clearly is important. But we don't hit lands completely differently when it's followed by, show me what you needed, versus when it's followed by punishment alone. One teaches the child what to do with the feeling next time. The other just adds shame to the overwhelm. What experienced parents and child therapists consistently observe is this. Children who are helped to name their overwhelming feelings. You were really angry that he took your toy. Show the hitting behavior taper off faster than children who are simply disciplined for it. Language fills the gap that the hands were trying to fill. If this hit home for you, leave a like, because this is the kind of thing I genuinely wish someone had explained to me sooner. Here is something that will either relieve you enormously or make you question every playdate you've ever attended. Toddlers are not developmentally capable of genuine sharing, not in the way we mean when we use that word. True sharing requires a cluster of cognitive skills that are simply not online in the toddler brain. It requires theory of mind, the ability to understand that another person has feelings and desires separate from your own. It requires delayed gratification, the ability to tolerate not having something now in exchange for a social benefit later. And it requires object permanence in a social context, the understanding that giving something away doesn't mean it's gone forever. Research in developmental psychology consistently shows that genuine theory of mind, the foundation of true empathy-based sharing, doesn't solidify until around ages 3 to 4, and for many children, later than that. When you tell a 2-year-old to share their toy, you are asking them to perform a cognitive operation their brain is not yet equipped to run. And when they refuse, when they pull the toy back and say mine with absolute conviction, they are not being selfish in the moral sense. They are being developmentally honest. Now, some parents will push back here, and it's worth addressing directly. Doesn't practicing sharing teach the skill? Yes. But there's an important distinction between guided turn-taking, which toddlers can learn, and forced sharing, which research suggests can actually backfire, producing more possessiveness and less prosocial behavior over time. The difference is agency. In 2 minutes, it'll be her turn, gives the child a timeline and a sense of control. Grabbing the toy and handing it to the other child teaches the toddler that their ownership isn't real, which doesn't build generosity, it builds anxiety. The parents who raise genuinely generous children aren't the ones who forced sharing at 2. They're the ones who modeled generosity consistently, narrated turn-taking with patience, and let the developmental timeline do its work. Some people think forcing sharing teaches empathy. Others think it teaches compliance, not kindness. Where do you land? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know if what you've heard so far has shifted something, if you've thought about your toddler differently even once in the last few minutes. Then you're exactly the kind of parent this channel exists for. Hit the like button so the algorithm puts this in front of someone else who needs it tonight. And subscribe, because what we do here every single week is take the science that lives in academic journals and translate it into something you can actually use at 7 p.m. when everything is falling apart. You deserve to understand your child, not just manage them. Because what's coming next? Behaviors 4 and 5. Those are the ones that genuinely surprise people. Stay with me. You call your child's name. Nothing. You say it's time for dinner. They don't move. You ask them to put the blocks away. They keep stacking. You walk over, say it again, and they look up at you with an expression that suggests they are mildly surprised you exist. You've probably wondered, are they ignoring me on purpose? Are they testing me? Should I be worried about their hearing? In most cases, barring any genuine auditory or attention concerns that your pediatrician can rule out, what you're watching is not defiance and not inattention. It is something developmental psychologists call hyperfocus, and it is one of the most cognitively sophisticated things a toddler brain can do. Young children, when engaged in self-directed play, enter a state of focused absorption that requires genuine cognitive effort to exit. The brain is not ignoring the external world out of defiance. It is allocating attentional resources to a task it has decided matters. Shifting out of that state requires what neuroscientists call executive function, the ability to disengage from one focus and redirect to another. And that is precisely the skill that is still developing. Here's what makes this genuinely important. The capacity for deep, absorbed, self-directed focus is the same capacity that underlies creativity, problem-solving, and sustained learning. Children who can lose themselves completely in block stacking or pretend play are exercising the attentional muscles that will carry them through complex learning for the rest of their lives. What experienced early childhood educators consistently observe is that children who are interrupted frequently during self-directed play, even with good intentions, show shallower, more fragmented play over time. The repeated interruption trains the brain away from depth. This doesn't mean you wait indefinitely for dinner, but a 5-minute transition warning. 2 more minutes with the blocks, then we're going to eat, gives the toddler brain time to complete its internal process and disengage voluntarily. That small shift in approach tends to produce dramatically less resistance than an abrupt demand, not because the child is being managed, but because their cognitive process is being respected. The tantrum, the meltdown, the complete and total unraveling over something that, from the outside, seems almost cosmically trivial. The sandwich cut in triangles instead of squares, the sock with the seam in the wrong place, the song that ended. You've probably felt 2 things simultaneously in those moments: compassion for your child and a quiet, exhausted despair that this is your life now. Here's what's actually happening inside that small body. The emotional outburst is a stress response cascade. The toddler perceives something as wrong. The expectation they had didn't match reality. And the amygdala fires a distress signal that floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. In an adult brain, the prefrontal cortex would intercept that signal, evaluate the actual threat level, and modulate the response. In the toddler brain, that intercept doesn't happen. The signal arrives at full volume with no filter. What this means is that the toddler is not choosing to fall apart over the sandwich. They are genuinely overwhelmed. The intensity of their distress is real, even if the trigger seems absurd to you. But here's the part that matters most for development. The tantrum handled well is one of the most powerful learning opportunities in early childhood. When a caregiver stays calm, stays present, and helps the child move through the distress, without shaming it, without panicking alongside it, and without immediately eliminating the source of the frustration, something important happens. The child's nervous system learns, through co-regulation, how to return to baseline. Over hundreds of these moments, the brain literally builds the pathways between the emotional centers and the regulatory centers that will eventually allow the child to self-regulate. You are not just surviving the tantrum. You are, with every calm presence you offer in the middle of it, building your child's emotional brain. The parents who find this hardest are often the ones who were never allowed to have big feelings themselves. If that's you, if watching your child fall apart makes you feel something uncomfortably familiar, that recognition is important, and it's worth sitting with. Share this video with another parent who needs to hear that their child's meltdowns are not a measure of their parenting, because I think a lot of people need that permission tonight. At this point, you might be feeling something complicated, maybe relief, because the behaviors you've been fighting turn out to be developmentally appropriate. but maybe also a different kind of pressure. If these behaviors are actually important, does that mean I need to respond to every single one of them perfectly? No. And developmental science is very clear on this. The British pediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott introduced the concept of the good enough mother, later expanded to good enough parent, in the mid-20th century, and it remains one of the most important and most undershared ideas in developmental psychology. His observation, supported by decades of subsequent research, was that children do not need perfect attunement from their caregivers. They need adequate attunement, presence that is good enough, often enough. What matters developmentally is not that you respond to every no with perfect validation, or that you handle every tantrum with textbook co-regulation. What matters is the overall pattern, the repair after the moments you got it wrong, the consistency of your presence even when your execution is imperfect. Researchers studying attachment have found that even in the most secure parent-child relationships, caregivers are attuned to their child's cues only about 30% of the time. 30%. And those children develop secure attachment, healthy emotional regulation, and strong social functioning. Because it's not about perfection, it's about repair. Every time you lose your patience and then come back. I got frustrated earlier. I'm sorry. You are teaching your child something more valuable than any perfectly handled tantrum ever could. You are teaching them that relationships survive rupture, that people who love each other can get it wrong and come back. That is the foundation of every healthy relationship they will ever have. So yes, understand the science. Let it change how you see your child's behavior, but carry it lightly. You don't need to be a developmental psychologist at dinner time. You just need to be present and willing to repair. If you've made it this far, you're not an average parent. You're the kind of person who wants to understand, not just manage. And that instinct, that curiosity about what's actually happening inside your child, that is the thing that makes the difference. Subscribe, because every week we go this deep. This is what we do here. Take the science seriously and make it real. Now, the last section. This one ties everything together, and it's the piece that I think changes how you move through the rest of toddlerhood. Understanding the science is one thing. Standing in your kitchen at 7 a.m. with a toddler who has just thrown their cereal on the floor because the spoon was the wrong color, that's another. So let's make this practical. There are 5 shifts that developmental specialists and attachment-focused therapists consistently point to as the ones that actually change the daily experience of parenting a toddler. Not because they fix the behaviors, because they change how you relate to them. Name the behavior before you correct it. When your toddler hits, says no, or melts down, try naming what you see before you move to correction. You're really frustrated right now. This does 2 things simultaneously. It activates the language centers of the brain, which competes with the emotional response centers, and it tells the child that their internal experience is visible and valid. It doesn't take long. It doesn't require a script. It just requires a breath and a sentence. Offer choices inside your boundaries. The no behavior, the emerging autonomous self, thrives on agency. You cannot always give a toddler what they want, but you can almost always give them a choice within what's acceptable. You can put your coat on yourself, or I can help you. Which one? The boundary stays. The self gets to exist inside it. This single shift reduces power struggle frequency dramatically in most households. Respect the transition for the child who ignores, the one deep in play. Build transition warnings into your routine. 5 minutes, then 2 minutes, then time. It's a small investment that pays back in dramatically less resistance and dramatically more cooperation. The child's brain gets to complete its process. Your dinner gets eaten while it's still warm. Stay regulated so they can borrow your calm. This is the hardest one and the most important. During a tantrum, your nervous system is the external regulator. Your child's brain is borrowing. If you escalate, raise your voice, tense your body, flood with your own frustration, you are adding fuel to a fire that was already too hot. If you can stay soft-voiced and physically calm, even when you don't feel it, you are giving your child's nervous system something to synchronize with. You don't have to feel calm. You just have to act calm long enough for the wave to pass. That gap between feeling and action is exactly the skill you are trying to help your child build. You're modeling it in real time. Repair without drama. When you get it wrong, and you will. Because 30% attunement is the human baseline, not the failure baseline. Come back simply. Earlier I got loud and I didn't need to. I'm sorry. No lengthy explanation, no guilt spiral, no making it a teaching moment so elaborate that the child ends up comforting you. Short, honest, warm. The repair is the lesson. The repair is what builds the trust that makes all of this work. Here is the truth that I want you to carry out of this video. Your toddler is not a behavioral problem to be solved. They are a human being in the most extraordinary period of neurological construction that will ever happen in their life. The bad behaviors, the no, the hitting, the meltdowns, the possessiveness, the ignoring, they are the noise that development makes. They are the sound of a brain building itself. Your job is not to silence that noise. Your job is to understand what it means, stay present inside it, and trust that the child on the other side of this window, the one who can regulate, who can share, who can hear no without falling apart, who can use words instead of hands, that child is being built right now, in the cereal on the floor, in the coat refusal, in the tantrum over the sandwich. You are not failing. You are in the middle of something extraordinary. The behaviors you were told to fix were never broken. They were blueprints. Thanks for watching. The end screen has more videos in the same world. Thanks for being here. Pick whichever video on the end screen calls to you.